rightly so, we're concerned about what impact that would have, not only on those members that serve here, but on the community at large. Today, we're honored to have with us the senior leaders from Robins Air Force Base to be able to talk as factually as they can with the most up-to-date information that they have about what those impacts will be as they see it today. Many of you have expressed a concern, both directly and indirectly to me, that we should not create an aura of hysteria because of the potential impact it may have on the businesses of Middle Georgia. That is not our intent today. But rather, our intent today is to factually share with you, the elected officials, and the business leaders and the members of this community, what it is that the base does know, so that we can honestly, logically, and effectively prepare for what the potential impacts will be. No one in this room knows what will happen next week or next month with regards to resolution of this issue. But if we do not prepare, we do not gather together and begin to discuss and take prudent steps, it will have an adverse impact on our region and all of us who live here. And so today we'll give you the opportunity to listen to our base leaders. At the end of their collective remarks, we will throw the room open to questions so that you can ask specific questions, and to the best of their ability, the folks sitting here in the front row will answer those questions. I'd ask two things administratively at this point. The first is, if you have an electronic device, I'd ask you to either turn it off or silence it. Each and every one in this room is here for a reason. They want to be able to hear, and if your phone's going off, they can. Secondly, we are blessed in Middle Georgia to have people who go out of their way to help each other, and in this case, to help the 21st Century Partnership. The gentleman who was trying to get you all to squeeze together just a moment ago is the general manager of this great facility. What I'd like to do is personally thank Dan Chun for his opening the facility to us, allowing us to come in and giving us a venue that's appropriate for the number of people that would like to hear this message. How about a round of applause? Very simply, today is about a dialogue between our base and the members of this community to talk about this thing called sequestration and its impact on all of us. So without further ado, let me introduce the installation commander, someone who's done a remarkable job of bringing this together as well as making remarkable improvements on our base, Colonel Mitch Budikoff.
Well, first of all, I'd like to take this time to thank all of you as our community leaders, whether formal or informal, our business leaders, our religious leaders from the Middle Georgia community for being here, taking time out of your busy schedules to come and be a part of this. We're grateful to have you here, and we appreciate the opportunity as part of the Team Robins leadership team to be able to provide this update to you all. And as General McMahon said, our intent here is to provide you with facts based on where we see things and how we see things impacting Robins Air Force Base if sequestration were to come to pass. Next slide, please. As you can see, there's a lot to discuss, and so we'll get right into it. Next. 3 budgetary issues concurrently are at play affecting the Department of Defense budget. First is the annual DoD budget not approved. Has passed. We're under continuing resolution authority, and we're funded currently this year at FY12 levels. So that's the first. Second is OCO, or Overseas Contingency Operation dollars. We have a shortfall in those dollars across the Department of Defense, and so we have to figure out a way to cover those costs. And thirdly, the Budget Control Act of 2011 cuts our defense budget over a 10-year period, including this F1. Next slide. For the continuing resolution, current CRA runs through the end of this March. March 27th is the day that ends. And uncertainty over our annual budget has forced the Air Force to take prudent steps to not spend dollars or trim back our budgets where possible. And these are some of the actions that have been taken already across the installation. Next slide. Bottom line, these things are having a negative impact on our nation's defense, both in the short term and long term. And I think former Defense Secretary Panetta spelled it out quite succinctly in his statement. Next slide. This slide demonstrates and shows the approximately $2.9 billion economic impact that Robins Air Force Base has on your community of Village Orchard. This includes annual payroll buying power in the local community, hundreds of millions of dollars in local construction, contracts, and procurement, and the value of additional local jobs created within a 15-mile radius of the base of the installation. Next slide. The wide-ranging impacts from reductions in flying hours and sustainment to changes in quality of life programs and services and possible civilian furloughs. Local impact of civilian furloughs alone is approximately $150 million. This takes into account both reductions in payroll and local jobs creation. And we have approximately 15,000 DoD civilians on the installation who will be affected by the furlough if it does occur. Next slide. If enacted, the Office of Personnel Management and Headquarters Air Force will provide specific guidance, timing, and notification to be performed consistently across the board with that guidance which is given to us. Next slide. This is a tentative timeline which we have been provided by the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Individual services timelines may vary slightly as we get into implementation of a civilian furlough. But as of this time, this is the best information that we have on furlough timeline. As you can see, the actual furlough of civilian employees, if it were to occur, does not begin until the end of April. Next slide. At this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to my mission partners from the installation, who will go through their individual implications and impacts from this sequestration and the other things we have facing us. And then I will come up and close it back out again with the implications for the installation as a whole. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce General George from the Air Logistics Complex.
Okay, good afternoon, and thanks to General McMahon and the 21st Century Partnership. And Colonel Bierkoffer, thank you for setting up this engagement here this afternoon. As General McMahon said, we've been planning. Now we will unveil what results of that planning has been and the specific impacts to Team Robins. Next slide. So I have the privilege, for some of the folks that are not in the room know who I am. I'm the Air Logistics Complex Commander. I have the honor to represent some 8,100 outstanding, proud Americans who are back across the way doing great work back at our depot. I'm honored to do that. The impact of sequestration will impact them all. They are a part of our community, you know that, and they are focused on the mission. But if I'm rigorously honest with you, I would tell you they are anxious. as I go around talking to them, you hear from them just like I do. They are anxious, they are concerned about what would happen if Congress could not and cannot come together with a balanced budget deficit reduction plan that the president can sign. So they're anxious. We're working with them, as Colonel Bierkoff and Chairman McMahon just said, trying to ensure that we are proactively planning if we can't get to that place. So what does that mean? Let me just try to take the words and talk in plain English to you. I currently have about 7.4 million hours worth of workload planned for this year. I've resourced the depot for that workload. Those folks are here. We were tasked this year to do about 177 aircraft. We have already produced 63 of those aircraft. Those are back out. They've been maintained, repaired, overhauled, and bonded, and they're back out in our Air Force. I have 82 of those aircraft in the depot right now. With the sequestration, we were asked to plan for 28 aircraft not coming in this year. So that would mean take our plan of 177 aircraft and bring it down to 149 aircraft. So what does all that mean and all those numbers mean? What that would mean is it's about 1 million hours worth of workload that would not come into this depot this year. And what we have asked our elected leaders is to give us max flexibility. And know that General McMahon and the 21st Century Partnership and many of our leaders have said, let's ensure we have max flexibility on how that workload comes back into this depot. But should we get to a place where we don't have a plan, what we would see is 1 million hours worth of workload not come in the depot in the third and fourth quarter. 28 aircraft would not come here. And that would mean about $205 million worth of lost opportunity this year. So we'd like to see that workload remain here and continue to be here. The furlough that Colonel Bierkoff talked about further exacerbates that challenge. What would happen with 22 days of 1 day a week where our civilians are not paid, that large group of proud Americans are not paid for 22 days, that means about 860,000 hours worth of production that wouldn't happen. And so it just compounds. And so when you heard words from General McMahon and our leadership talking about devastating, it would be devastating. We don't want to sound the alarm. We want to be realistic, have a fact-based discussion. We need to continue to do what we're doing to ensure that first, we continue to advocate to our leaders, let's get a plan together. The Air Force is planned. You see the impact that if we have to do this, we're ready to walk through this. But I would tell you that I would thank you for what you're doing right now in terms of listening to our proud mechanics, our proud maintainers, and all the folks that do the work there. But I also tell you, I thank you for what you're going to do, because you're doing a lot of things already. What we are doing within our community right now across those great Americas is I'm going out. Each of the leaders will probably tell you the same thing. We're talking to our team, we're saying, know your budget. You need to know where your money's going. You need to start talking to folks about making a plan should this come into effect. And so that's what we're doing. Your arms are wide open. They are wide open today. We're going to ask you to continue to do that as our workforce prepares for this. What I hope, I think General McMahon, you said it best in one of your initial articles, what we hope is the plan comes together and we will have a plan for a contingency that did not happen. So with that, let me turn it over to the next commander. Come on up here, sir. And I look forward to any questions you have. Thanks so much.
You know, in my nearly 34 years of service, the only thing I can think of worse than having to listen to a one-star is have a two-star follow. So, my name is Major General Bob Millman. I am the mobilization assistant to the Reserve Command and the commander of the Reserve Command, Lieutenant General James Jackson. And on behalf of him, I want to say thank you for this opportunity to be able to speak to all of you. I can't think of a better defense community in America than Middle Georgia. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to address you. These are tremendously challenging times, and I first want to recognize Mitch Butikoff, you know, as host of all of us mission partners. Mitch, we can't thank you enough for your leadership and for what you have done, not only for the base and the base populace at large, but certainly for this community as well. Please give me You know, these across-the-board cuts that we talk about are indeed devastating, and they're regrettable. But the reality is that we have to deal with these law as it's currently written, not as we wish it to be. And so that's the approach that we are taking as we go through some of these mitigation processes. We're hoping, and hope is a big word these days, but we're hoping that as the leaders in Washington go through their continuing resolution process, that by the time they break for their Easter holiday, which is around the 23rd this month, that hopefully we'll have some better news. And that news that we're looking for is to give the Department of Defense the opportunity to manage the spending cuts versus the across-the-board spending cuts. So that's kind of what we're hoping for with regards to how we go forward in the future of these cuts. The bottom line is that it does affect nearly 70,880 citizen airmen in our command. We are the largest of the 10 major commands in the Air Force Reserve. We partner with the Air National Guard as well as our active duty counterparts. And so we are following in lockstep with many of the challenges and the mitigation that the Air Force as greater is looking at. In particular, our up to 18% flying hour cut. We as a command will do away with our air shows, our installation open houses. We'll curtail our orientation flights, and we will certainly focus on deployment readiness as our top priority as we move forward. Second area that we are concerned with is our modernization, and certainly, again, just like our active duty and guard counterparts, we're going to delay military construction projects. We'll either delay or project them to the right into fiscal year 14 and beyond, as well as our depot work. And so we are working through the plans on that. And perhaps, indeed, most important to you and to us is our workforce. We're concerned about the morale and the welfare of our people. Across our command, we have more than 13,000 civilians who are affected by these cuts. But unique to the Air Force Reserve Command is 9,000 of those civilians that we talk about are what we call Air Reserve technicians. These are our folks who dual hat not only as Title V federal civil service employees, but they also are Air Reservists as well, Air Force Reservists. And in the past, they were always exempt from these cuts or government shutdown actions. And that's not the case now as we look across the board with the sequestration. So we've got some challenges on how we're going to manage our day-to-day operations as these people look to take their 20% work reduction just like everyone else will. But we will get through this, and we will continue to work to make sure that we can provide the capability that this country expects of the Air Force Reserve Command. Let me just leave you with one thought as we move forward here. And I recently heard the Secretary of our Air Force speak, and these are indeed very challenging times that we do face. But he talked about us being the world's finest and most capable Air Force as we began this sequestration process. And our intent is to continue to be the greatest and most capable Air Force in the world. That's our challenge, that's our focus, and I have no doubt that we will succeed with your help, and certainly with the help of the entire team here and Team Robinson. The numbers that you see up top here are the specific impacts to the local area. You can see those, and you can see the impacts in particular to our reserve technicians. Thank you all very much. I'm going to introduce Colonel Hicks to talk about the DLA impacts. Thank you.
Good afternoon, folks. Dan Hicks, I command Defense Logistics Agency Aviation Unit on the base. First, I want to thank you for your interest that brings you here today. More importantly, I thank you for your ongoing commitment to the missions that we do on the base and to the national defense that we are all a part of. The Defense Logistics Agency employs at Robins Air Force about 725 folks. I'm the only one of those who wears a uniform, and so virtually every part of the Defense Logistics Agency that's here in Middle Georgia is subject to the budget things that we're talking about here today, especially the impact of the furlough. As a commander, I worry most about my young families that are there, that are part of my command. I haven't had a chance to necessarily get all of their finances together in their homes, maybe like someone of my age. So I worry about them. In particular, I can put some names and faces in front of me right now, but young folks that I am concerned about because of this. We, the agency here in Middle Georgia, provide both goods and services, logistics services, to the entire Department of Defense. I'm in a joint agency. I wear an Air Force uniform, but currently I'm assigned to a joint agency. So we, the agency, provide global support to the Department of Defense. All of the services receive both goods and logistics services from our agency. So some of those 725 folks that I'm talking about have different missions. Some of them on my team, for instance, have a very localized mission that happens only within the fence line of Robins Air Force Base, and they're solely dedicated to supporting, for instance, the complex and the maintenance effort that goes on under General George. Others have a regional mission, and they're part of the Defense Logistics Agency, and they call Middle Georgia home. So they support other military installations in the southeast. And then there's a good group of our folks who are Defense Logistics Agency employees who actually have a worldwide impact. The large warehouses that you would see on the base run by the Defense Logistics Agency actually have parts of them that are shipped every day to various parts of the world. 55% of the mission of those large warehouses is actually an off-base mission that goes out either into the southeast region of the U.S. or across the seas. So we have a worldwide mission, and so it's hard for us to actually say what we will do person by person when we implement the furlough if it were to occur, because we have to adapt to the services who need our support. So for instance, those who are currently in Afghanistan need our support, and the people who are doing maintenance here at Robins Air Force Base need our support. So for each of the various missions that DLA has on the base, we're going to adapt our schedules so that we can provide the continuous support that the department needs from us. I think that if I were to send one message to you as the local leadership, it would be this. Obviously, I am concerned with my folks, part of my command, and those who are employees of the Defense Logistics Agency. But I am hopeful that our leaders in Washington will actually find a way to resolve this before those young families that I worry about are impacted. I believe they're going to present something to the president that he can sign. I have to believe that, because otherwise I'd stay up more hours at night worrying about those young families than I do already. Thank you for your time, and again, your interest and your commitment to our missions at Robins Air Force Base. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Clodfelter. My friend Colonel Clodfelter is the commander of the 116th Air Patrol.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Kevin Clodfelter, and I have the privilege of commanding the men and women of the 116th Air Patrol Wing. We are the Air National Guard Wing, and we are a tenant organization to Robins Air Force Base. And we have been over the last 17 years. Many of you will recall the B1 unit and now the J-Stars unit. We went through a blended Air National Guard and active duty wing over about 10 years, and within the last year we've moved to an associate construct, still with Air National Guard and active duty members present. Next slide, please. The Air National Guard wing is a little unique. We have a different status of civilian workers. We have Title 32. We call them dual status employees. Really, in layman's terms, what that means for you are they are military personnel who perform drill status, have military duty, and they also deploy. But on a weekday basis, they're in a civilian status. But they wear a military uniform, so by and large, you're not really able to tell them apart from an active duty or military Air National Guard type person. But the big thing is for a wing that has over 1,100 personnel, I have just over 400 of those dual status civilians that will be affected if there's a furlough. We're on just a little bit different time interval than the federal employee, but really it amounts to 22 furlough days through the end of the fiscal year, probably beginning at the end of April, should that happen. We could expect some degraded operations and some adverse impacts to our mission, and you see the categories of the operations flying mission, the maintenance mission, and also the mission support flying and state missions that we have as an Air National Guard unit. To put that in perspective, should the furlough occur over those 22 days, it'd be a lost income of those folks, aggregate of that about $3.2 million. During this time, should that happen, my focus is going to be making sure that we can still train military members as we can, and also to support our forces abroad. We've been on the road since early 2003. As to date, we have supported 6 combatant commanders abroad and at home, and that will be our focus. But I do want to thank you for your continued and unyielding support. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Colonel Dean Whirling, Commander of the 461st Air Control Wing, the active duty wing that's part of Team J-Stars, as Colonel Kevin Clodfelter just briefed you earlier. I'm honored to be in command of 1,300 airmen in the 461st Air Control Wing. Next slide, please. And for us, as you just heard, very, very similar impacts as you've heard throughout the afternoon. I thank you for the opportunity to speak with the rest of the team today about the impacts. Because one thing, as you can see, as we've developed and planned ahead, now we're executing as we've gone through the sequester period. Not only do we have concerns about accomplishing our varied missions and literally global missions, in particular in the case of J-Stars, but also local here at home, and we treasure your support. As you can see on the slide, the biggest thing that you're going to see from the 461st Air Control Wing and mission impacts and personnel impacts have already been briefly touched on. Our ability to train will be degraded during this period, and that will also directly impact our ability to send multiple forces downrange or overseas. From a personnel front, as you've also heard, we will have an effect as well. Now, the pure number of civilians, Title V civilians, as you see on the slide, that I have in the 461st Air Control Wing is only 30. But those 30 are valuable to us. And much like Dan Hicks already explained, they are folks that we speak to, counsel, discuss daily, and are concerned about their future. So how do we work through this as we execute and implement? The 3 things that we're looking at right now, number 1 in our priorities, is the ability to deliver combat power of Team J-Stars downrange, whether that's against our enemies in Afghanistan or around the world, literally as we are today in 3 different locations around the world, protecting American interests. Second thing is combat readiness. This is the biggest challenge that my guard partner and I, Kevin Clodfelter, and I have to balance in this time, to make sure that we are ready for whatever we have to answer your call as part and defend our nation. And then the last thing is do it safely and effectively. Safely and effectively makes total sense. We're flying aircraft, we're conducting maintenance, we're doing mission support downrange. That makes a lot of sense when you speak about deploying. But here over mid-Georgia, we also are going to ensure that nothing we do is unsafe. Every time you see an E-8 flying around, the readiness, the safety is there during this rough time. And then lastly, obviously, we will continue to look at our vital civilian airmen. I look forward to answering your questions, and thank you for your support of Team J-Stars and Team Robbins in general.
Good afternoon. I'm Colonel Rick Foltz, representing the men and women of 689th Combat Communications Wing. Next slide. You've heard a lot about furloughs. Again, we have a smaller support system for DoD civilians. We have about a dozen locally here at Robbins. We also have a unit in Tinker. But much as Colonel Burley said, we rely a lot on them because we deploy in support of flying operations. They provide the continuity and the expertise that we absolutely need within combat communications. The mission impacts for us, for a unit that goes out and provides deployed support in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, that does humanitarian response operations in places like Haiti, and also does contingency operations, most recently in support of Hurricane Sandy, is maintaining our level of proficiency to provide communications and cyberspace support
and also to maintain our readiness level. Readiness being our ability to quickly execute and support the flying operations wherever those might be, inside the United States or overseas. I will tell you, it is a tremendous honor to be a part of Team Robbins. I think of Team Robbins often, not only as the installation, but the community. This is a wonderful community. I know the support's going to be fantastic for everyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Kim Lynn. I'm representing the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. Our mission is to provide war-winning capabilities to the warfighter through the acquisition and support of a variety of goods and services. And I'm here representing 11 program divisions and 4 staff offices. Personnel side, next chart, we will have military personnel. If they are assigned to a program office, will be there to conduct mission-critical activities. However, our 2,000 plus civilians will be furloughed along with the rest of the civilians across Team Robbins. And we do have a number of support contractors who are an integral part of our program offices. And for those individuals, depending on how the contract is structured, the contractor support may be able to come and work on the installation if there are military personnel going to be there in the office. They may be asked to work from their downtown location. They may be asked to telework, or potentially there could be some extension of hours during the non-program time. From a mission impact standpoint, the number one priority for Lifecycle Management Center is going to be support to ongoing combat operations. As you know, we support a number of aircraft and types of equipment that are involved in these ongoing combat operations, from F-15s to C-130s to supporting moving vehicles. Currently, we're looking at our operations and maintenance dollars to look at the first set of reductions. This includes a lot of repair work, a lot of support in the field to various weapon systems. So each of those contracts that